what we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue.
Welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on topics from across the world. Now, from military operations in Syria and pressure on Venezuela to strategic signals in the Arctic and escalating warnings towards Iran, the US is asserting its power across multiple fronts. At the same time, controversies at home, from the Epstein files to immigration policy, are raising serious questions about accountability, transparency, and America's global credibility. To discuss this, joining us now is Erik Lehmkuhle, an independent investigative journalist and author of The Swiss Effect and From the Mouth. He has written extensively on power, geopolitics, and the intersection of elites and policy in the United States. Thank you for joining us, Erik. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Erik, let's start with the questions then. My first question, the US has recently carried out or supported military actions in Syria and increased pressure on Venezuela. Do you see these interventions strengthening US security and its hegemony in the world order?
I think the way that Donald Trump, the way that President Trump and Secretary Hegseth initiate military action is a little bit different than what the world is used to out of the United States. They're being very swift with their action and very precise with maximum amount of damage. So I think it's keeping these countries on their heels to where they're not real sure how to react to it. Anything that with the 3 U.S. soldiers that were killed in Syria, President Trump made it very clear that he was going to hold those accountable. And we are seeing that play out. It didn't happen quite exactly at the time that he probably would have liked it to happen. However, it did happen, and it does look like mission was accomplished. With Venezuela, it was an opportunity. I see there's a much bigger spectrum when it comes to Venezuela. For one, they get to choke the Cuban economy with their dependency upon Venezuelan resources. Also, it also helps restrict oil flow to Russia, restrict oil flow to China. So it does cause a pause in what some of our adversaries here in the United States, what they can do. Economically attacking countries is what President Trump seems to like to do. He did it to Iran in the first term. He did it to Russia in the first term. And we're seeing that play out again. So I like to think that President Trump is being very strategic. It may look like a lot of chaos, but I kind of, when you take a step back and really look at what President Trump is trying to do, especially with the Venezuela situation, it's kind of killing many birds with one stone.
Sure. Washington has also openly expressed strategic interest in Greenland. You would know, Erik. Is it, as Trump really says, a pragmatic geopolitical positioning, Or does it reflect a troubling return to new imperialism?
So the way I see this, and this is going to differ from most pundits out there. I see this. I look at this from an overhead view, and say this isn't a. Let's not look at this as a Donald Trump policy. Let's look at this as a 100-year-long policy. Now, do we find a way to coexist this land with Denmark and with NATO to keep Russian forces at bay, not only now but in the future? Greenland acts as a sort of a dome over the northern part of the hemisphere. So you get many vantage points strategically, militarily, from Greenland. We can't depend on Canada as much in the United States for those vantage points, simply because they're starting to migrate towards dependency on China, with their Prime Minister Carney doing more geopolitical things with China. So there's that aspect of it where we have to come up with some kind of Arctic vantage point, and Greenland is the apex of that. There's no doubt about that. I'm hoping that they can get together and they can come up with some sort of beneficial way for everyone to utilize Greenland because of the low population that Greenland has and the large amount of land mass that it is. There's a lot of areas of Greenland that are not being utilized for anything. Now, when we look at Denmark's GDP versus the United States GDP, we're looking at 31 trillion versus 500 billion. So can Greenland really defend that giant hunk of land of Greenland? I don't believe they can. I think if Russia really wanted to push their way in there, or if China wanted to push their way in there, they could very easily do that very quickly. Whereas if there was a heavy American influence in Greenland, it's going to detract them from attempting that. So I think strategically it just makes sense. I think it's just a matter of having all the diplomats getting together and coming up with some kind of strategic plan to allow a coexisting of allies on that landmass.
Erik, US has also issued repeated renewed warnings towards Iran, and there's rising geopolitical tension that we are seeing. Is this Washington acting as a stabilizing force, seeking to prevent escalation, or is it inadvertently pushing the Middle East closer to open regional conflict?
I think when you look at the progress that's been made in the Middle East, especially with the reemergence of the Abraham Accords since President Trump's been back into office, as we know from his first term, the Abraham Accords was one of the most historic events of peace that's ever happened in that region.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately that fell apart when the Biden administration came in, and now President Trump has kind of put that back together. It does appear to be stronger than it was before. Iran is the catalyst in that region that keeps it unstable. So I think once Iran once that regime is overturned, and I do believe that the Ayatollah is going to be overturned within the year, I do believe that it's going to create a lot of stability and cooperation from all the countries in that region, and hopefully with American investment, we can help build those countries up to where the economic advantages of keeping peace are so great that war will no longer be an option in that region.
As far as Gaza is concerned, proposals regarding reconstruction and potential US involvement have generated significant international reactions. What's your opinion of the constitution of the Board of Peace? And how would you react to the contentions that are being raised on it?
I do think that the Gaza situation is a little more complex, obviously because of the U.S. and Israeli coalition. I do believe that President Trump, as we've seen with Benjamin Netanyahu, President Trump has put his foot down several times with Israel and said, no, you can't do this, or hey, that's not quite right. So we are seeing President Trump kind of referee that situation there. We're not really seeing too much where President Trump is demanding policy change or demanding Gaza get the Palestinians get this and the Israelis get this. We're not really seeing that negotiation as of yet. I think he's kind of hoping that the two sides can eventually, come together, abide by their ceasefires, get all the hostages sorted out, and come up with some kind of a plan to coexist in that region. I don't know if that's going to be possible without Iran being there, without their regime being overturned. So I think what we're seeing is the United States getting involved in Iran, and with the protest and with the potential regime change there, that's going to heavily alleviate the tension that is going on in the Gaza region. So I think it all kind of plays hand in hand, and we're going to see, once one concludes, we're going to see the others conclude in succession.
All right. Now, the continued controversy that's surrounding the Epstein files. Let's talk about that. There are unresolved questions of elite accountability. They have deepened public distrust in American institutions. Do you think this will affect Trump's prospects in the midterms upcoming?
I do think it is going to have an effect on President Trump. I think it's a popular belief here in the United States that the Epstein files need to be released in its full grandeur. However, the way our justice system works is when investigations are ongoing, when there's a potential for DOJ indictments, federal indictments, which this would fall under that, they can't just throw all of the information out there. Plus, we don't know how much international influence is in those files. Now, that could complicate things further. If the prince of whatever is in that list, is on the Epstein files, how do we as Americans deal with that in our justice system? Do we ban them from our country? Do we have, how does the Department of Justice and the White House deal with something like that?
Let's talk about Trump's references and the references of the U.S. president.
Yes. So with President Trump, being mentioned, several times in there, it's hard because we can't paint the full spectrum because we don't have all of the information. Former President Bill Clinton is in there a lot as well. So, but can we really draw conclusions without seeing the full spectrum? It's easy to play, Monday morning quarterback when you have partial information. I think it's going to be fair to say that we should reserve those rights and reserve those opinions until we've seen all of the information. However, it doesn't quite work like that. Our media on both sides tend to, jump on one extreme or the other when it comes to the Epstein files. It is a touchy subject. A lot of people want to blame President Trump for that. A lot of people want to blame our Attorney General Bondi for that. A lot of people, there's a lot of blame getting thrown around there right now with all of the tension with the immigration issues that we have. It's kind of fallen to the wayside a little bit, but I do see the Epstein files re-emerging right before the midterm elections.
All right. We're now going to speak about ICE. Immigration and ICE enforcement are affecting state-federal relations, and it remains one of the most divisive issues in American politics as of now. In your view, Erik, what would constitute a fair, realistic, and sustainable U.S. immigration policy?
I think I'm going to go back into the Biden administration with this. I think the Biden administration set the immigrants up for failure. I believe that when President Trump, as we know, the Biden administration had a very poor immigration policy. They had a very poorly guarded border, and a lot of people came into the United States illegally. How there should have been a transition period where most of the cities in the United States have a liaison with a lot of those communities where most of the immigrants come from. So it wouldn't be completely impossible to get information from the government to the immigrants that came in. So there is a communication that can be had. I believe that when Trump got elected president, that was when the Biden administration should have said, you guys have 60 days to get to an immigration office, get documented before Trump takes over, because President Trump is going to deport everybody. And that never happened. We never heard of an immigration plan to help these immigrants once they came in. How do we get them legalized? How do we give them visas? How do we give them education and work visas? There was never a plan for that. And so I can kind of go back and say, well, had President Biden really put together a solid contingency plan for this, we might not be in this situation right now. President Trump is not against immigration. He's against unlawful immigration. And that's something that most countries in the world have the same kind of policy. You can't just walk into many countries in the world without having the proper documentation, without being vetted by that country's government. So for us to be under that spotlight, I don't believe is very fair, because we are one of the few countries that has just allowed immigration to just run rampant. President Trump is trying to put together some boundaries for that. And I think it's an 85-15 issue here in the United States. Most Americans want to know who's in our country. Do we have people wanted in several other countries that are just walking into our country? The safety of Americans, we have a high crime rate here in America. We have our own issues, let alone to bring, criminals from other countries into our country. So it's something that I think needs to be addressed. And I think once these parameters get put together, our country is going to be in better shape, and we'll be able to control the flow of immigrants in and out of our country.
All right, Erik, thank you for joining us and for sharing your insights on focal length with us on NewsX World.
Thank you.
Viewers, with that, it's a wrap on this episode of The Focal Length. For more international news and updates, as always, stay tuned to NewsX World.